What's up everyone, my name's Kevin Boudreau, and today I am very excited to be testing Arrtx markers. Now I have worked with them in the past, but today they have sent me their 90 color acrylic brush set, and I'm excited about that because in the past I've tested out markers that had a good variety of colors, but I've never had a 90 color set. And if you've seen my work, you know that I tend to enjoy lining with color instead of always lining in just black. I like to use a lot of darker tones of colors, so very excited to test these. You can see I've got some stuff set up here. I have this canvas that I spray painted, and I used white Cerol transfer paper to transfer this image onto the canvas. Now this image, I have this overhead camera by the way too, so I will show you some stuff here. This image was from my sketchbook that I will eventually do a tour of, but it was this piece right here. Kind of based off of raw Egyptian background, and there is no, I know I didn't do the sun, I didn't do the snake on the top. I just kind of wanted to simplify things and have fun doing this character. So I basically took a photo of this, put this photo into my iPad Pro, and using Procreate I was able to make a nice clean line drawing of red lines and then print that out, size it up, transfer it onto the canvas so that we could just open these markers and go for it and test them out and see how they work. All right, so I have not actually opened this box up yet, but we could take a look at how they send it. There's the front, and on the back you can actually see all of the colors with the numbers just to keep it nice and organized. So I'm gonna set this like this and let's lift and see what it looks like. Okay, so we have a color chart here as well. Very convenient. And yeah, there's all the colors right there. Got the numbers right on them. Got the numbers here so that we could check. So very organized. So far so good, but let's see how these actually work. All right, so I've got this scrap piece of paper here. This is just printer paper, and I want to test out some yellow. So there is the yellow. I'm gonna let that dry, and then you know what I want to do? I want to test out, I'm gonna take this teal, and I'm gonna let that dry good. And then I want to see if the yellow will go right over the teal. Well, let me dry this really good. All right, I think that's nice and dry. Let's take the yellow. Pretty good coverage. You know, you could probably get some pretty cool effects when things aren't super opaque. It really depends on the markers you're going for, but if I let this dry for 2 more seconds, I just want to try hitting it again with another line over it. So we'll do a second pass now. All right, so second pass, much more opaque right over that, you can see. So that's not bad, because like I said, you could probably get some pretty cool effects with some of the transparencies from these brush pens. So let's see if we could maybe even apply that to the work. I'm going to dive right in, and I'm just going to move this right under here, and we're going to go to the overhead camera, and we're just going to start going at the canvas. I wasn't really sure where to begin with this piece, so I grabbed the color chart to kind of reference that one more time, and I decided to start with the yellows again right at the top. Now my first impression was that this was just super smooth. I loved the way that the brush tip just glides across the canvas. I could see that there was some pretty good surface coverage, but I knew that it was going to be tough to get yellow over such a dark tone of spray paint, so I wasn't really sure what to expect or what I was in for. At the very least, I wanted to just make sure that I got a good base down on the canvas. And as always, I like to use my hairdryer to just make sure I speed up the drying process, but I gotta say these markers did dry fairly quickly. And you could see what I was talking about before with lighter tones being an issue sometimes to cover on darker surfaces. In that roller pad, I knew I was definitely going to need a second coat, but it also seemed like certain colors were more transparent than others, not just the lighter tones. It just kind of happens sometimes with markers. So I was just going to push through and keep testing these. What I do want to point out though is that these markers go over the dried marker very well. So again, I maybe am not giving this the fairest test by having spray paint on a canvas. I know for sure that these would work phenomenal on a white canvas. But again, because I toned it with darker tones of spray paint, there's going to be issues. It's to be expected. In the future, one thing I can do to prevent this issue is I can just do the character on a white canvas and then tape off the character and spray paint around it. I did also come up with another solution that you will see later on in the video, but we'll have to wait to get there. At the end of the day, I just want to be fair and give a fair assessment of the product to you guys as a review. And I gotta say, not bad. I definitely do like the smoothness of the brush tips, but I also have to say I do think that I personally prefer the nib tip, but the brush has such a smoothness to the actual feel of it going across the canvas. It's just, for some reason, I feel more controlled with the nib tip, but that is just a preference. Both are great products. If anyone watching has happened to use Arrtx themselves, let me know in the comments. Do you prefer the nib tip or do you prefer brush tip? And what do you think of the markers in general? At this point, I'm starting to move along. It looks like I am going to start working my way around the canvas a little more. I wanted to save the head for last, just because I knew that that would be the most fun for me. So I like to save the best part till the end. I don't know if that's something you do, but as I started working on the skin tones for the body, that's when I started worrying a little bit more about the transparency, and I started thinking about solutions that I can do. Now, I know earlier I talked about possibly trying to use the transparency to my advantage, but lately I've just been trying to paint as saturated and as clean as I possibly can. So these markers could be the perfect markers for someone that does a lot of layering with some transparent effects to it. Like, let's say landscapes, you know, just layering little tiny pieces of grass, things like that, that could really be effective with these markers. That's just not how I was trying to paint this piece. So because I was trying to be super opaque and super just saturated and clean, I was being super picky. Anyways, the best solution that I could come up with was to just base everything with white paint. However, one of the concerns I had with doing that was that I was gonna lose all of my white lines that I put down on the canvas from the stencil. So I decided to go around the entire image and line it with a blue marker so that some of the blue marker might show through some of the white paint. Now, the most ironic part to all of this is that my white paint was actually more transparent than the markers were. I definitely should have done a second coat of the white paint, but let's be honest, I'm lazy, I was impatient, and I just wanted to get back into using the markers and see this piece come to life. Now, I also want to show you a scrap piece of paper that I used to make the stencil. I did a little test portion with the markers on that just to prove that it does work on just plain old white printer paper. Now, I thought this was important because this isn't some fancy paper. This is just your plain old regular printer paper, and it does not bleed through, which is great. So if you happen to be a fan of any like coloring books or anything like that, it's not going to bleed through the pages. So that is definitely a huge plus to this product. Obviously, it would also be great for sketchbooks that you may want to sketch in. And even if you use a canvas, just don't spray paint it like I did. Just go at the canvas. Trial and error, guys, trial and error. Anyways, let's get back into the canvas. I'm excited to see how this thing turns out now that there's a sloppy base coat of white on it. And you can immediately see what a huge difference that white base coat did for this. The markers are just covering phenomenally, much better. Obviously, at this point, I was kicking myself for not doing this sooner, but like I said, trial and error. Just learn as we go, guys. Now, as for the colors, as I said, there's a 90 color selection. That's awesome. So I wanted to try to incorporate more tones as I went along. I started implementing a little bit of green on that cap to the spray can, and later on you will see more green come in as well. But I gotta say, I was having a blast having all these colors to choose from, and it just makes my job so much more easy and fun. However, there was another tiny little hiccup that happened, but luckily it was a super easy fix. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see at some point a little dot appeared on the canvas. I'm assuming this happened while I was either capping or uncapping a marker, but all I had to do was just wet a paper towel and just wipe it right off because these are water-based acrylic markers. So if you catch it soon enough, you could just wipe that right away. And now back to painting. Overall, I really like how quickly you can color sections in with these brushes, but I also like just how smooth they feel when you're doing the line work. I definitely became more comfortable with the product the more I use them. Just a few more details around the canvas, and then I can finally get started on painting the character's face. Since we're getting close to the end here, I want to of course take a moment to give a special thanks to all of my paid Patreon members now. You guys absolutely rock. I always appreciate you guys, and if anyone watching wants to help support and become a paid Patreon member themselves, you can head on over to Patreon. I will leave the link in the description of this video. There you can always stay ahead of the game, see all the projects, behind the scenes, things I'm working on. So be sure to go over, click the link, and check it out for yourselves today. Of course, another way to help support is to go on over to my website, kbuart.com. Here, there's plenty of merch available, from original artwork to prints of my artwork, sketches, there's stickers, there's some t-shirts. I'll even put this piece up on there. There's way more than what's being shown here, so be sure to check it out today and maybe pick yourself up something. I really appreciate it. Now let's finish up this painting. This is the point of the painting process for me that is usually the most fun. I've got all the tedious portions taken care of, and I can just focus on the face of the character. And of course, as you may know, I try to save the eyes till the end because I feel like that's just where all the life of the character is. I decided to go with a nice vivid green just to make sure that there was more use of color, because after all, this is a 90 color set, so I just wanted this thing to pop and be just nice and saturated and super colorful. I had a blast testing out these markers, and I want to give a huge thank you to Arrtx markers for sending me these. And if you guys want to try these for yourself, I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video so that you could just click on that and go right to the product. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and without further ado, let's take a look at the final outcome.